The meadow lay pale under a thin veil of frost, the grass stiff and glimmering where the first light of morning touched it. Winter had not yet loosened its hold, though the air carried a faint softness, the kind that hinted at change rather than promising it. A low mist hovered near the ground, drifting in slow ribbons that moved only when the light wind urged them to. The world felt suspended, as if waiting to decide whether to step forward into spring or stay just a little longer in the quiet of cold. A deer emerged from the line of trees at the meadow's edge. Its coat was thick and muted brown, with lighter shades along its neck and underbelly. Frost clung to the fur on its back in delicate crystals, catching the soft light of dawn. The deer moved with careful steps, each hoof pressing into the grass without breaking the fragile rhythm of the morning. Its ears flicked gently, listening, not for danger in particular, but for the shape of the day itself. The deer paused halfway into the meadow, lifting its head to breathe. The vapor from its nose rose in a thin cloud that dissolved almost instantly. It stood there a moment, unmoving, as though it was not simply crossing a field, but entering a memory it had walked many times before. Across the meadow, a fallen fence lay in broken segments, its wood darkened by years of winter and rain. Beyond the fence stood an old barn, its door hanging crookedly, roof bowed but not collapsed. The barn had once held warmth, movement, hands working, voices calling. Now it stood quiet, an empty shape of something that had mattered. The deer's gaze shifted toward the barn, not with recognition but with awareness. Animals know places where the world once gathered itself more tightly. The meadow held one of those places. A thin wind passed, bending the frost-coated grass. The deer stepped forward again, moving toward the center of the field. Each step was unhurried. Each step was certain. The deer was not searching for anything. It was simply continuing. Deep within the tree line, a crow called, a single sharp sound that echoed briefly and then faded. The deer did not startle. The meadow did not break. The frost held. Then footsteps touched the earth, soft, slow, human. A man appeared near the barn, wrapped in a heavy coat, shoulders stiff from winter's weight. His steps were careful, not wanting to disturb the quiet more than necessary. He carried no tools, no rope, no purpose that could be seen. He stopped near the fallen fence and rested his hand on one of the weathered posts. He saw the deer. The deer saw him. The distance between them was wide enough for safety, narrow enough for recognition. They did not move. They did not challenge. They simply occupied the same morning. The man's breath lifted in faint clouds like the deer's. His gaze was steady, not hungry, not lonely, just present. There was tiredness in the lines of his face, the kind that did not come from work, but from remembering something that had ended. The deer lowered its head, not to flee but to continue its path. It walked through the frost, each step quiet, each step certain, moving toward the far side of the meadow. The man watched it go, his hand still resting on the fence. When the deer disappeared into the trees, the meadow felt different, not emptier, but acknowledged, as though something had passed through not just the field, but the day itself. The frost remained. Morning did not warm yet. Winter hesitated, not gone, not clinging, just holding on for one moment longer. The next morning came slowly, wrapped in a soft gray light that blurred the horizon. The frost had not lifted. It clung to the grass as though winter feared letting go too quickly. The meadow was quieter than before, though it had not been loud to begin with. The kind of quiet that settles in places where the world understands it is changing, but has not yet decided how. The deer returned before the sun had fully risen. It appeared at the same place along the tree line, stepping out from behind a cluster of young pines. Its fur looked slightly darker now, damp where the night air had settled. Its breath formed gentle clouds that drifted upward, slow and steady. The deer paused again, as if listening to something beneath the surface of sound. The meadow remembered it. Animals know when a place holds memory the way a river holds depth. The deer walked further this time, toward the center of the field. Its hooves pressed the frost down, leaving faint impressions that would fade once the day warmed, if it warmed. The barn stood where it always had, leaning slightly toward the east, as though bowing to the morning. The wood was grayed and softened by age, but the structure held. A life once lived inside did not vanish from a place simply because time passed. It settled. It lingered. The man returned as well. He came from the opposite direction today, stepping along a narrow trail where the grass had been pressed by years of footsteps, though not recently. His coat was the same, heavy and worn. His pace was slow, not from hesitation but from familiarity. He did not need to rush. Time moved slowly here. He stopped at the edge of the meadow, though farther from the deer than the day before. He did not want to push the moment. The deer turned its head toward him, ears alert, but its body remained still, steady. The man raised his hand, not high, not waving, just an offering of presence, a greeting given without expectation. The deer watched him for a long moment. Then it lowered its head and continued grazing. The man exhaled softly, not relief, but something quieter, a breath that had been held without him realizing it. He walked toward the barn and stood near the door, looking up at the structure as though it were someone he had known long ago. He did not go inside. Some places are visited first from the outside, before memory is strong enough to cross the threshold. He leaned one hand against the wood. The door felt cold, solid, familiar. A patch near the handle was worn smooth, years of daily use, long before the meadow grew wild around it. The deer lifted its head again. The man did not look at it this time. He simply stayed where he was. The silence between them was not emptiness. It was recognition, of coexistence, of presence without demand. A small breeze moved through the grass, bending the frost just enough to make it glimmer. A few flakes of old snow still clung to the shaded parts of the field. The day did not warm quickly. Winter lingered the way memory lingers, slow to release, slow to fade. After some time, the deer turned and walked back toward the trees. Its movements were unhurried, as though it trusted the morning to remain exactly as it was. The man stayed by the barn until the mist began to lift. Only then did he step away, hands in his coat pockets, heading toward the winding path that led out of the meadow. The frost did not melt. Winter hesitated again, but this time not in resistance, in consideration. The third day broke under a sky the color of pale wool. The clouds were thick, but not heavy, stretched across the horizon in smooth layers that seemed to mute the world below. The light that filtered through them was soft and cool, giving the frost on the meadow a faint silver glow. There was no wind, no birdsong, only the sound of distance, the quiet that comes when the world is waiting for something to shift. The deer arrived earlier than before. It stepped into the meadow with measured calm, its coat brushed by fine crystals of frost that sparkled where the muted light touched them. It walked a little farther this time, not toward the barn, but toward the center of the field, where the grass grew taller, untouched by anything except the slow weight of winter. The deer stopped and lowered its head, grazing carefully, each bite slow, as though the land itself was something to be respected. Frost melted where its breath touched, revealing blades of grass still clinging to green beneath the season's hold. The man came later. His steps were slower today. Not tired, just thoughtful. He carried something small wrapped in cloth, nothing heavy, nothing purposeful. When he reached the fallen fence, he sat on one of the broken rails, the wood firm beneath his weight despite the weathering of years. He did not look at the deer right away. He looked instead at the meadow itself, the frost, the softened shapes of the grass, the space where morning held its breath. His eyes traced the horizon, the barn, the trees, the sky, all of it familiar, all of it unchanged. Only he had changed. The deer lifted its head and watched him. No fear, no curiosity, just awareness. Animals understand presence without needing to give it meaning. The man unfolded the cloth. Inside was a small tin cup, dented, worn, but clean. He set it on the rail beside him and let his hand rest on it for a moment. "My father used to bring coffee out here," he said. "Not toward the deer, not toward anyone, just into the open air. He'd sit in this field before the sun came up. Said the day felt clearer when you watched it begin." The deer did not move. The man's fingers closed around the tin cup, his grip light, not clinging. He was always the first one awake, he continued, always moving, always working. I didn't understand it then. He paused, letting the cold air fill the space between words. Now I think it was the only place he knew how to breathe. The deer stepped forward a few paces, not closer to him, but along its own steady path. It grazed again, unbothered, unhurried. Its presence did not comfort him, and it didn't need to. It simply existed, and that was enough. The man set the cup down on the fence rail. He did not fill it. There was no coffee, no ritual left to perform. The memory of the act was the act. He breathed in. The meadow held the breath. For a long time there was only the quiet. Frost, air, the faint crunch of the deer's grazing, the steady pulse of a morning not yet sure of spring. Eventually the deer lifted its head and looked toward the forest. Its ears flicked once. The decision to leave was gentle, effortless, natural. It turned and walked back toward the trees, disappearing between the branches without sound. The man watched until the last movement of brown fur faded into the shadows. Then he stood. He did not take the cup with him. He left it where it sat, on the fence, in the frost, in the place where a day once began for someone who mattered. The meadow accepted it. Winter did not retreat, but for the first time, it did not hold as tightly. The fourth day was colder than the last. Not sharply, not in a way that bit at the skin, just a deeper kind of cold, the kind that settles into the ground and decides to remain there a while. A thin film of ice covered the shallow puddles near the tree line, and the meadow's frost had thickened, layering itself into the grass like a second skin. The breath of the land was slower now. The deer did not come early this time. The meadow waited without needing to wait. The man arrived first. He walked the same path, hands tucked deep into his coat pockets, steps steady and familiar. He approached the fallen fence and paused, not out of uncertainty, but out of recognition. The tin cup still sat where he had left it. A thin frost covered its rim. He brushed it away with the back of his hand and rested his fingers around the metal for a moment. He did not sit right away. Instead, he walked toward the barn. The structure hadn't changed. The wood was still darkened, the roof still bowed, the door still hooked loosely to the frame. The man ran his hand along the outer wall as he walked, fingertips tracing the grain of the wood as though reading something written there. He stopped at the doorway and stood there, not stepping inside. A breath. Not of hesitation. Of remembering how to enter gently. He crossed the threshold. Inside, the barn was quiet. Dust hung in the air in faint threads, visible only where the light found them. Old tools leaned against the walls, long unused. The floor still remembered footsteps. The air still held the shape of warmth that had once been here, though none remained. The man stood in the center of the barn and looked up. He could almost see it. A figure moving across the floor, boots scuffing wood, hands steady, voice low and warm. His father had always worked in silence, but it had never been a lonely silence. It had been a silence of purpose. The man let the quiet settle around him, as though the barn itself exhaled, recognizing him. Outside, footsteps moved through frost. The deer had come. It crossed the meadow slowly, as if the cold made each step more deliberate. The mist of its breath rose in steady pulses. It walked to the center of the field and stopped, not to graze, not to pause, but simply to be. The man stepped back out of the barn. He did not approach the deer. He did not need to. He stood where he was, hands at his sides. The deer lifted its head toward him. The space between them felt thinner today. Not shorter, not closer, just less divided. There was no tension, no expectation. Only two lives existing in the same cold morning. The man spoke, not loudly, not to be heard, but because the words had been waiting. He stayed as long as he could. The wind passed lightly through the grass. He didn't leave the place, the man continued. He just finished his time in it. The deer's ears flicked once, a response without meaning words. The man's breath showed in the air in slow clouds, the same rhythm as the deer's. "I think," he said quietly, "I'm learning to do the same." The meadow did not change. The frost did not melt. Winter remained. But something eased. Not in the air, in the man. The deer turned, unhurried, and walked back toward the trees, disappearing into the thick quiet of the forest. The man remained by the barn for a while longer, not waiting, just standing. When he finally walked away, he did not look back. The meadow held the moment. Winter hesitated, not because it feared leaving, but because leaving was no longer the point. The fifth day began without frost thickening or melting. The meadow looked nearly the same as before, though something subtle had shifted in the light. The sky was clearer, a pale blue opening behind thin clouds. The cold was still there, holding its calm grip, but the air felt different, lighter, as though winter itself was exhaling. The man came later today, not because he was reluctant and not because he forgot. He simply moved at a natural pace, without urgency. The path to the meadow was familiar now, not something he walked toward, but something he walked with. His steps pressed softly into the frozen grass, the sound faint, steady. The deer was already there. It stood near the fallen fence, its body still and relaxed. Its breath hung in the air in slow, gentle clouds. When the man arrived, the deer did not lift its head or tense. It simply remained, acknowledging him the way the land acknowledges dawn, quietly, without needing to change form to be seen. The man approached the fence and sat where he had sat before. The tin cup still rested beside him. He did not touch it today. He only looked at it for a moment, and something eased in his chest. Not sharp anymore, not heavy. Just part of him. The deer moved a few steps closer. Not enough to break distance, just enough to share space. The man rested his hands loosely in his lap. "I think he would have liked this," he said, voice even, steady. "Me being here, not rushing off, not trying to outrun anything." He looked at the meadow, not the deer. "I kept thinking grief was something to get through," he said. "Something with a finish. But it's not. It's just part of the landscape now. Like winter." The deer flicked its ears once, then lowered its head to graze. The man watched the movement. Slow, sure, present. The world continued, and did not demand he keep pace with it. A faint breeze moved across the meadow. Not warm, not cold, just enough to stir the grass. The barn creaked lightly, one board shifting as the wood adjusted to the day. The sound was familiar, the kind of sound a place makes when it has known many seasons and expects more. The man stood, not abruptly, not in farewell. He stepped closer to the fence, resting one hand once more on the weathered rail. The tin cup remained beside it. He did not need to take it with him. Some things belong to the place where memory meets quiet. The deer lifted its head and looked at him, not with fear, not with need. Just presence, meeting presence. The man nodded, small, steady, final only in the way a breath is final before the next begins. "I'll come back," he said. But there was no weight on the words this time. No clinging, no promise held too tightly. Just truth. He turned and walked the path out of the meadow. His steps were sure. The air felt different around him. Not warmer, not brighter, just more open. The deer watched until he disappeared behind the trees, then continued grazing, slow and calm, as though the day had simply unfolded as it was meant to. The meadow held the moment. Winter did not leave, but it no longer hesitated. It rested.